Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Tulip growing is easy in cold climates. In warmer climates, though, getting tulips to rebloom year after year is a challenge. Today, America's favorite retired college horticulture professor, Debbie Flower, has tips for warm climate tulip growers to get those gorgeous bulbs to rebloom year after year. And she has advice for all tulip growers about the steps to take to make sure your bulbs remain at maximum strength, whether they're in the ground or not. Entomologist, master Rosarian, and professional photographer Baldo Villegas has tips for taking pictures of garden bugs so you can positively ID the good guys from the bad guys. Do you know what your full-grown trees are worth? The answer is rather surprising. Arborist and master gardener Ann Fenkner has the way to help you figure that out. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon Jungle in Suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots. And we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. A lot of ways to get your questions in. You can call us, just like Mary did. Who's Mary? You'll find out in a second. There's several ways to get in touch with us. You can give us a call, 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. You can email the questions into fred@farmerfred.com. Leave it at the gardenbasics.net website. You can do speakpipe.com, where you don't need a phone. You incur no phone charges. You just yell at your computer and I magically hear your question. Go to speakpipe.com/gardenbasics. And of course, use social media if you prefer. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find those links in the podcast notes, and you can leave a question there as well. Debbie Flower is here. We love to have her here to answer our garden questions. And Debbie, Mary has a question about tulips.
Yes, she does.
And tulips, for California gardeners, can be rather tricky.
Yes, and parts of California are 9B. And that's what Mary said she lives in. Zones 9 and above, for sure, tulips can be a challenge. There are a few, they're called species tulips, that grow just fine in California. I have some in my yard. But the majority of the ones, the big Darwin tulips, the really colorful ones that bloom in spring, will do that for us the year we buy them, but we have to take special care of them in order to bring them back the next year.
Well, let's hear Mary's question.
Hi, Farmer Fred. I'm Mary, calling from Zone 9B. Quick question about tulip bulbs in containers. I had several containers, planted tulip bulbs. They did beautifully. Now they're done. But I want to use those containers for something else now. What do you recommend doing? Can I save the tulip bulbs and pull them out of the containers? How should I store them, etc.? Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you for calling us, Mary, with that question. I guess, Debbie, first of all, we should explain the difference between an A and a B zone, because the USDA divides all zones now into 9A, 9B, 6A, 6B.
Right.
B is warmer than A.
Yes, it is. Right.
By about 5 degrees as far as the lowest, the coldest temperature.
USDA zones only take into account the average coldest temperature for that area. And it spans about 20 degrees for one zone. And so the A zone is the cooler end of that, and the B zone is the warmer end of that.
So Mary lives in a very moderate climate, 9B,
yes, she does.
Just like we were talking about, probably here in Northern California. You know, not that any nursery is paying me, but I always tell people, just go buy new tulip bulbs every year. It's a lot easier.
It is. A couple things need to happen in order for the tulips to be saved and be satisfactory for the bloom the next year. One is tulips are bulbs. Bulbs are underground storage organs, and they wither. Some of the food stored in that bulb underground gets used when the plant flowers. And so the bulb, the storage organ, withers somewhat. And so it needs to be restocked. And that is done by allowing the leaves on the, in this case, tulip, to remain above ground after it's done blooming, and let them photosynthesize, take good care of them, make sure you get some water, some nutrition, and let it photosynthesize and make new plant food, which it will store in the bulb. And so you need to leave them growing until those leaves turn yellow. I know that's annoying. With containers, that's delays your ability to harvest and reuse the tulips and reuse the containers, but you can at least move them to somewhere where they're not an eyesore. Then let it dry out and take the bulbs out. Yes, you can save the bulbs. Yes, you can reuse the containers. Brush off all the media. Store it in I like to use peat moss because peat moss has some antifungal properties, so your bulbs won't mold. And it can have a tiny bit of moisture, but not be wet because the bulbs can rot. And then you're going to have to put it in the refrigerator. Below 48 degrees Fahrenheit is the ideal temperature for 8 to 10 weeks. So I would say for 10 weeks. And that is to do the process called vernalization. Vernalization is the forming of the flower. If the tulip is not exposed to 10 weeks of cold, it will not form a flower. So you have to do that process, and you don't want it anywhere near fruit. So if you're using your food refrigerator, you're going to have to separate the two, bag them up, the fruit in particular, because fruit gives off a gas called ethylene, which is a ripening gas, and it would cause the flower to abort in the tulip. So it's a little tricky, but it's doable. When they're done commercially, they have big walk-in coolers. They pot the tulips up, and then they stick them in the cooler and let the already potted tulips get chilled that way. But we all don't have those facilities. So then after the 10 weeks, the tulips can come out of the refrigerator and be stored until you want to plant them again and grow them.
Where would you store them?
Well, you want to store them in a place that's not going to stimulate them to grow. So a cool, dry place.
All right. Under your bed, with notes all over the house that you have tulip bulbs under the bed.
in your wine cellar.
Right, yes. All right, let's talk a little bit about what you said, the unsightliness of the leaves. And this is true with any bulb. If it's in the ground, you have to wait for the leaves to turn yellow. Don't cut them off when they get ugly. You just have to do something with them and yet remain intact. I have heard people who like to gently bend the leaves down to ground level so they're not so unsightly.
If they're a very vigorous bulb, that's fine. If they're a more finicky one, they're going to need their whole leaf to restock themselves. Usually, of course, the more finicky ones are the more expensive ones.
Naturally.
Of course.
Yes. And when it comes to the containerized tulip bulbs, well, Mary, I guess you could buy more containers, because if you set those containers with the bulbs like you recommended, behind the garage or whatever, you're still going to need containers. So maybe buy a second set of containers.
It delays her ability to use those containers because they do have to use those leaves until they're yellow.
Do you have to water that tulip bulb as it's dying down, as the leaves are dying down?
Think of it as a living green plant, and you want it to be able to use the green parts to make plant food, and water is needed for that. So yes, you need to water it.
Even though the leaves are dying back,
right?
You still need to water it to...
So it can do something. Plants, this is a common problem with houseplants. Plants that dry out, aren't watered frequently enough, will look great, and then they'll get watered. Oh, somebody will notice they're drying out. They need water. They water them, and then all of a sudden they drop things. They drop leaves, or they drop flowers, or they drop stems, or whatever. And the reason is they can't do anything if they don't have the water to be able to do it. Everything comes to the plant and water, and everything travels away from the plant and water. It has to have water in order to do things.
So you need water for that underground storage system to stay
for the plant to continue to make food, and then move that food to the underground storage system.
So I guess putting it behind the garage isn't a good idea if you want to
be able to see it, right?
Yeah.
Put it somewhere where you will see it.
Debbie Downer. All right.
Unfortunate name I have, isn't it?
Yes. All right. So Mary, I like the idea of buying more pots.
Or go to an estate sale or a garage sale. You often find pots there.
Yep. All right. There you go. Tulip bulbs. A challenge here in California, but for the rest of the country, do you even have to dig them out?
No, when I grew up in the East, in New York and New Jersey, we didn't dig them up.
Yeah, they just stayed there.
They just stayed there. In fact, they were often planted my family often planted them on grave sites. So you go in the spring and visit, and there'd be a lovely flower.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Did you picnic there?
No.
Oh, they do in Chicago.
Do they?
Yes.
Maybe they don't have enough grassy areas in the city.
They did. I found that interesting. I thought it was kind of nice, actually, visiting my wife's relatives back in Chicago. And it's like Uncle Ralph, first thing he says is, let's go to the cemetery and visit Grandma and Grandpa. Okay. All right.
I taught plant ID in cemeteries because the trees were relatively well cared for. They tend to be limbed up because they had to drive underneath them and with equipment and such, but they were spread apart. They were good specimens to teach from.
There you go. From tulips to cemeteries. We cover it all here on the Garden Basics podcast. Debbie Flower, thanks so much for your help on this.
Oh, my pleasure, Fred. Thank you.
I'm pretty picky about who I allow to advertise on this podcast. My criteria, though, is pretty simple. It has to be a product I like, a product I use, and a product I would buy again. And you know who checks all those boxes? It's Smart Pots. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Smart Pots are sold around the world, and they're proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors and can be reused year after year. Some models even have handles, and that makes them a lot easier to move around the yard. Because the fabric breathes, Smart Pots are better suited than plastic pots, especially for hot climates. That breathable fabric has other benefits too. Water drainage issues? Not with Smart Pots. Roots that go round and round choking the root ball like they do in plastic pots? Doesn't happen with Smart Pots. These benefits will help you get a bigger, better plant than what you've gotten in the past with the same size plastic or other hard container. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how for a limited time you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED. F-R-E-D. Use it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful, award-winning fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount. Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. It's not just about planting trees, it's also about planning to plant trees. So how do you plan to plant a tree? We're talking with Master Gardener Ann Fenkner. We're here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center in Sacramento County. Ann is a tree expert. She's also an arborist. And yeah, that's probably one of the last things people think about when they get a tree is, where am I going to put it? How's it going to get water? How am I going to take care of it? And these are all things that can be thought about before you even get the tree, including thinking about what trees are best.
Oh, that's right, Fred. The right tree in the right place for the right reason. I really encourage people to think about this ahead of time. You know, we go to the nursery and we kind of lose our minds a little bit. It's very exciting. There's everything there and it all looks so good. And people tend to get excited and maybe kind of make a on-the-spot decision and not really take into consideration the situation where the tree will be living for the next 60, 80, or even longer, many years.
If it lives that long, because if it is in the wrong place, it might have a shorter life.
Well, wouldn't that be a shame to lose all that money and time and energy in the planting process?
That's a very good point you're making, is the value a tree adds to your overall home value.
Yeah. There's a wonderful resource people can tap into. It's called iTree. And if they go to itreetools.org, you can actually evaluate the environmental benefits in real dollars of what your trees contribute to your property. And not just your own property. It could be, you know, where you work, your place of religious worship. It could be your kid's school. It's kind of fun. What you need to know is how to measure the diameter of the tree and what kind of tree it is, and then the location. And the science, the algorithms will figure it all out, and it's pretty darn exciting. Have you done this at your house yet, Fred?
I'm going back in my brain to 6th grade trying to figure out the diameter of a tree if you know the circumference, and I forget the formula.
Oh, you know what? The wonderful thing in life now is we have computers, and it'll figure it out for us. So all you have to do is put a measuring tape around the tree at 4.5 feet, diameter. It used to be called diameter breast height. It's now considered diameter standard height. But it's kind of where my clavicle is, 4.5 feet off the ground. You measure the tree. If you need help identifying the tree, there's a guide there and give you different pictures and that sort of thing. And you identify, again, the size of the tree, what type of tree it is, and where it's located. The information comes from years and years of research from the U.S. Forest Service. And it's absolutely, it's fun and it's fabulous and it's free. And Triple F.
The website again is
itreetools.org. And there's several different applications here. There's tools for designing your yard or for your designing your landscape. There's tools for evaluating an entire city. But the one I encourage people to go to is MyTree. It's very easy, and you can identify the environmental value. And I'm talking about shading, stormwater holding, carbon storage. What is this tree doing, and what is the value of that to your home? Again, itreetools.org.
The right plant in the right place is really especially true for trees. In Suburban Purgatory, there are trees that were never meant to be planted in Suburban Purgatory on lots that are 1/10 of an acre or thereabouts. Too tall trees, messy trees, invasive trees, and the trees that are correct for where you live.
That's right, Fred. But also kind of think back in time, 40, 50, 60 years ago, we didn't have the resources that we have today. Oh, my goodness, just think about it. Even the box stores didn't exist back then. Where did people get their trees? They might have received a tree from a friend, or maybe at the swap meet, or if they were lucky, they had a nursery in their hometown. But mostly we select from the stock available. So people did the best they could with the information they had at the time. The thing about it is that we know more now, and we can do better now.
And everything we know is wrong, too. So that always helps when conducting hindsight. How many of the best trees in the world have turned out not to be the best trees in the world? I can think of Modesto ash, for one thing, for the Central Valley of California, that turned out to have a lot of problems.
Perfect example. Again, right tree in the right place for the right reason. And I would argue that most of the challenges come with selecting a tree that is not suitable for the space, not suitable for the soil, not suitable for the environment, including irrigation. These are all things to consider, Fred.
Well, we can take a scenic bypass right here talking about irrigation and the fact that many states, not just California, but a lot of the Southwest, some of the Midwest too, are facing drought. But you still want trees.
That's right.
Can you grow trees on limited water?
Absolutely. In fact, the city of Phoenix, the mayor has just instituted an initiative to plant an additional 1 million trees. She understands, as do all scientists, that trees are part of the answer to climate change and heat reduction.
I bet they're not coast redwoods.
No, right tree, right place, right situation, Fred. Yep. But I'm really proud of the mayor and of other leaders. Another communities taking bold action is the city of Los Angeles. They are conducting inventory of all city trees. They've already completed the inventory of every park tree, and they are well into over 600,000, the number. They think they have about 1.2 million, maybe 1.5 million street trees, and they're halfway through counting them all. It's an exciting prospect because in understanding what you have, you can better manage it. You can't really manage anything if you're not aware of the situation, right? And so in collecting data on every single street tree, they're also able to identify where they're lacking trees. There might be a pit that a tree is missing. Well, the city of Los Angeles has this fantastic program that they've pre-vetted local community groups in the neighborhoods to plant trees. So as the inventory is being collected, it's being shared through city plants, who then deploys pre-vetted, qualified citizen groups to plant trees. It's a speedy effort, so there's no delay, and the city of Los Angeles is really taking an aggressive, a serious approach to increasing their canopy as a strategy for reducing heat.
That's Master Gardener and Arborist Ann Fenkner. So how much does a tree add to the value of your home in a real estate perspective? Well, a tree in front of a house increases the home sales price by an average of $7,000 or more. And if that tree is part of a beautiful, well-kept landscape, it can increase your home value 6 to 11%. More information about how trees can increase the value of your home from a real estate perspective, we have a link in today's show notes called What Trees to Add or Cut Down to Increase Property Value. Look for it in the show notes. How many times have we said, read and follow all label directions? But how many of you have actually read through the pages and pages of instructions that come with some of the most popular weed killers on the market? In the Friday, June 10th edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, we highlight some of the most important passages in those instructions that you might have missed. Instructions that can help keep your desirable plants alive after you've applied that weed killer. And we chat with Debbie Flower about the best ways to kill weeds organically, and that's with soil solarization. And now's the time to do it. It's all in the newsletter that goes beyond the basics, the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred Beyond the Basics newsletter, and it comes out Friday, June 10th. Find it via the link in today's show notes or visit our new website, gardenbasics.net. There you can find a link to the newsletter in the tabs on the top of the page. And you can also listen to any of the previous editions of the podcast, as well as read an enhanced transcript of the podcast episode that you're listening to now. It's at gardenbasics.net, where you can also link to the Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And it's free. Look for it on Friday, June 10th. So take a deeper dive into gardening with the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. Find it at gardenbasics.net. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. A lot of you like to send pictures of bugs that you can't recognize. As long as you tell me where you're from and maybe take better pictures, we'll get into that. I can help you out because I have contacts. I know people who know bugs, including this guy right here. If you're looking at your phone, you can see that it's Baldo Villegas, retired state entomologist, Master Rosarian, or you're above Master Rosarian now, aren't you, Baldo? You're like a Emperor Rosarian? What?
No, I'm still a Master Rosarian.
Okay.
I do a lot of identification of insects from all over the world for people.
Yeah.
And as long as they send me a picture, if it can be in focus, that'll be great.
Yeah.
If it can give you an idea of how big it is, that's also nice.
What is the easiest way to do that?
Put your finger right next to the bug. One of your fingers, and then that way I can get an idea of how big it is. Also tell me how common it is in your garden. I like to kind of get an idea if it's really a pest or not. Most of the insects that I see are not pests. They're innocent bystanders that just come to the roses or to the plants just to take a little drink of nectar or get a little bite of the pollen.
You know, speaking of taking a drink, Baldo likes to walk his acreage here carrying a mason jar full of alcohol. You know,
Not full of alcohol.
Okay, half full of alcohol.
And it's rubbing alcohol.
All right. But this is a great way to get that picture of that bug is you capture it first, and then you can put that dime or your finger or whatever next to it so other people can get an idea of just how big the bug is.
Correct.
So tell me about your mason jar of rubbing alcohol.
I fill it just a little bit of alcohol, and then I go around in the mornings through my garden. I enjoy my garden every morning, and then I look for unusual stuff that might be flying by. Several years ago, I found a little tiny insect called a sawfly. It turned out to be a new pest for this area. And a lot of gardeners have a lot of problems with this sawfly. Common name is a rose slug. It's called the rose slug. And it skeletonizes the surface of the leaves and is very common in our area from Orangevale all the way into the foothills and all the way into Oregon and Washington.
And entomologists get really excited when they find something new.
Yes, I first found it in this area in 2013. And since then, it's become a major pest.
Baldo is famous for all the bugs that he's discovered in the Sacramento area. Now, we are in Baldo's acres, and being a master Rosarian, the last time I heard, Baldo, you had over 1,000 roses. I think it's more than that.
I have 1,500 roses in the ground and then over 1,000 potted plants.
But the beauty of being in a rose garden of that size here at the end of April and early May, it's all in bloom. It's just gorgeous here.
Yes, my garden is going to be in full bloom for the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to be enjoying my garden every day.
All right, let's talk more about taking pictures of bugs that you need to get identified. So like you say, it's important that people send as much information as possible when they send that picture of the bug, where they found the bug, maybe what season they found the bug in. Tell us about your garden, what you're growing, maybe the activity of that bug. Does it fly a lot, or is it just slowly crawling along? What is it doing? When you take a picture of a bug, and especially if you've captured it in alcohol and you can pose it, what items on a bug are you looking most at for a positive identification?
The best thing to do is get several of the insects, because you might be seeing the immature stages of the insects. So it's also very important to get the adults, because the adults are much easier to identify. The nymphs, or the immature stages of some of these insects, oftentimes are very difficult to identify by a lot of entomologists. But a few entomologists can do it. I know a lot of the immature insects for this area, but if somebody sends me a picture from Connecticut or Massachusetts and they show me a moth, I don't know when the heck that is. So what I do is I have friends who know friends. I send them to friends in that area, and they identify them for me, and then I get back to the person with the correct identification, and maybe if he's a pest or a beneficial or something that just passing by.
When you're looking at a bug, an adult bug, trying to identify it, are you looking at the number of legs, the antenna, or what?
All insects have 6 legs, antennae. The legs are in the thorax. Yes, those are, all insects will have that. But beetles will have, the hardened wings. The first pair of wings are kind of hardened, so you know that it's a beetle because of that. If you see a proboscis, so the mouth parts are in the form of a syringe, then that's a true bug, or an aphids. Anything that sucks will have those proboscis, which suck the sap out of the plants. So you look for characteristics like that. Also, very important, you look at the wings. The wings are the most important thing in insects. In fact, all of the orders of insects usually have some kind of name in the wings. Like Coleoptera means hardened wings. That means first pair of wings. Neuroptera are the lace wings, and the wings are lacy. They call nerve wings. So you look for things like that.
So what is
Hemiptera?
What does hemiptera mean?
Well, hemiptera is for the true bugs, and hemi means half. Ptera means wings, so half wings. And that's when they fold the wings, the first pair of wings in there, they look like half wings. You always see a little triangle in there, where just above where they fold the wings, and that's called a scutellum. So you look for the half, for this kind of character.
You come for the roses, stay for the bug talk. It's Baldo Villegas, retired state entomologist, master rosarian. Thanks for the photo tips, Baldo.
Thank you. Anytime, Fred.
Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and it's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net, and that's where you can find out about the free Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And thank you so much for listening.